Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the chance. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So the president, it appears, was watching your interview yesterday when you spoke with George Stephanopoulos because he was tweeting about it this morning. And in his tweet, He said that you are backing him up in this threat to declare a national emergency in order to build the border wall. What do you say to that, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I realize that we live in a world where truth no longer matters and you can say what you want to say. All I said, I think it would be a huge mistake to declare a national emergency. There is no national emergency. And that's what underlines this entire issue. We have spent an enormous amount of money on border security. We've built a wall over a good portion of the border long before President Trump got into office. President Trump is artificially creating this emergency to keep up his anti-immigrant, xenophobic, borderline racist, they're coming for us from the border. We're spending money on border security. What doesn't make sense is to build a wall that even the president doesn't seem to know why he wants it, except that he made the promise. Now, of course, he promised that Mexico would pay for it, so why are we having this fight in the first place? But this is the key issue. There is no justification at all on border security grounds for a wall. Everyone says, the wall's not going to help at all. Now, when you talk about declaring an emergency, the President of the United States has an enormous amount of power. It's one of the reasons we need to be real careful about who we elect president. The president can declare a national emergency and take money out of the Department of Defense. And there is no clear legal history for what a national emergency means. Now, he'd be challenged in court because there clearly is no emergency. There's no reason for this on border security grounds. But they asked me, can he do it? Yeah, he can. It would be wrong, it would be horrible policy, and I'm totally and completely against it. But from a legal standpoint, he could do it. And then he's taking the money from the Department of Defense. And keep in mind, the $5 billion that we're talking about in this shutdown crisis, the cost of this wall, undefined as it is estimated to be between $20 and $30 billion. That's what he would take out of the Department of Defense. So can he do it?
Yes,
but
totally
it would be a
unclear
terrible idea.
Unclear what he would take. And totally unclear if he's actually going to make good on this threat. As we know, the president has made many a threat that he has not made good on. But when you say that it would almost immediately be challenged in court, if he would make this move, would you spearhead that lawsuit?
No, absolutely. But look, if I'm going to be honest here, and I realize honesty is not well rewarded in politics these days, but look back at the history. I mean, the Japanese were interned because President Roosevelt declared an emergency and did it, all right? And the courts upheld it. We don't have a long history in this country of the courts standing up to executive power. So it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. I'm not saying it's a good idea, but those of us who oppose the wall, those of us who think that the president is demagoguing this issue, wasting money, look, the crisis on the border is asylum seekers. They're not trying to sneak in. They're turning themselves in. It's a terrible idea, but he could do it.
Does the administration now calling it a steel barrier or even a fence, does that make any difference to you?
No, it makes it clear the president has no idea what he's talking about. Look, understand what this is. Way back when the president gave a speech and started attacking immigrants and started talking about the wall, and he got a good response from the conservative base. That's why he decided he wanted a wall. Hey, people seem to like this.
No, Mr. Chairman, you're not against, and I've heard you say, you're not against a wall as part of a border security
No. Well, I am
policy.
against the wall. I am against the wall as part of a border security policy right now. And Nick Mulvaney said it best, before he was working for Trump, when he said this is a childish idea to think that a wall is what's going to protect us. What has been done, walls have been built along portions of the border, the portions that make sense. We've made massive investments. We have tripled the number of border security agents. We have drones, we have sensors, we have planes. A wall is a colossal waste of money for a crisis that doesn't exist. The border security money that we've spent, it's worked. The number of unlawful crossings has gone down dramatically in the last 15 years. The number of undocumented people in this country has gone down. That has worked. The crisis on the border, the asylum seekers, and again, they're not trying to sneak in. They're turning themselves in. That's what we need to address. A wall doesn't help anything.
So the negotiations going nowhere. I do want to ask you about another very important topic. The very big news overnight about Syria. The president, he's gone now from troops are coming home now, which meant 30 days. Then it became 4 months. And now John Bolton has announced, while he's overseas, that U.S. troops are going to stay until ISIS is defeated and the Kurds are safe. Do you know what the timeline is?
Well, look, this is very similar to the border wall issue. It shows that our president literally doesn't know what he's doing. He is making it up as he goes along based on the whims of, I guess, what he sees on Fox News or what his mood is, because John Bolton raised the two issues that are blindingly obvious. Look, I don't want us to have troops overseas any more than is absolutely necessary. But the two big questions, if we pull out of Syria, what happens to ISIS? What happens to the Kurds?
Right.
That's blindingly obvious. But the president just blew right past it to say, let's pull them out. The biggest problem right now.
So do you in some way applaud him for changing course?
Who?
The president.
The president hasn't changed course. And no,
that actually raises a very important question.
Right.
I want to get your take. Who speaks for U.S. foreign policy? Is it John Bolton or is it President Trump?
The president does. He's the president, unfortunately. And when you say, do I applaud him for changing course, he's changing course like a drunken sailor, okay? You know, there's no thought behind it. What we need is actually rational policy in Syria on border security. All we have is the emotional rantings of a child, all right? And he goes back and forth depending on what the last person says to him.
In the most immediate
undermines
sense,
our credibility.
In the most immediate sense, as the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, for the 2,000 service members who are overseas in Syria, or quite frankly, any service member who is in any combat zone right now, is the policy? Are they coming home now? Do you know if there's another timeline?
Nobody on earth knows, because the president makes it up as he goes along. And that is terrible. Look, if you want to come and make a case, look, we've been in Syria for this long. Yeah. It's time to pull out. Here's why. And here, by the way, you can't just pull 2,000 troops out of an area like that. You have to do it intelligently. There's all kinds of logistics involved. You have to have a plan. But this president doesn't operate in that universe. He operates on the whims of his emotions. And the message that sends, even if it is the right policy to pull all the troops out of Syria, the way he's going about it is disastrous for everybody involved. Have a clear, coherent thought and then organize the policy in a structured way. This is ultimately why Secretary Mattis left. It wasn't just the decisions, it was the way the president made them. You know, like a 4-year-old. And we cannot govern the world, we cannot have relationships with our allies and have a clear foreign policy when he flits all over the place with no intelligent rationale. Whether it's the border wall, whatever it is, it's just sort of what he feels like in the morning. At some point, he's going to have to take a briefing. He's going to have to read a book. He's going to have to actually understand what's going on in the world instead of just making it up as he goes along, because we're all going to pay a horrible price for it.